Welcome to the Theory of DFS podcast. I'm Jordan Cooper, the co-author of The Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports. It's a 15-hour audio masterclass, the general game theory of DFS, whether it be NFL, PGA, NBA, MLB, it doesn't matter. Whatever sport that you play, the DFS concepts still apply. So go to theoryofdfs.com to pick that up. And join with me, as always, as usual, not always, is Erik Beimfohr, who we'll be doing a short show today because it's COVID season in NFL, which means there are games on midweek and showdowns, 2-game slates. And Erik, you're always doing the showdown content over at Roto Grinders, so it's been kind of, you don't get a day off anymore, it seems like.
You never know when the days off are coming because NFL is rescheduling. We moved games to Wednesday last week. We've moved games to Tuesday in the past. We're moving games to Tuesday this week. I'm just waiting for the Friday game. Friday is the only day we haven't had a game, which is also like my busiest day, both like from work and, I'm trying to like rebuild my own, work on my own teams and stuff kind of starting on Friday. So I'm just waiting for the next outbreak to push a game somehow magically to a Friday. So yeah, I guess it's good for most people. I'm not really excited about Ravens Cowboys, but I guess there's football on and most people like that. So
well, starting on Friday, we got NBA preseason.
Oh yeah,
DFS.
I'm excited.
So you're going to be playing NBA preseason?
Oh yeah, I love all the preseasons. Summer League, I play Summer League. RIP Summer League, but all those I love all those kind of random. I also am just like a huge basketball fan. I think like I grew up more like football and I think like probably like most people got into DFS with football, with NFL specifically, but just like I don't know if it's I'm getting older and I'm preferring basketball or like the DFS part of basketball is more fun to me. I've just like fallen in love with basketball and NBA and everything. So I'm super excited for NBA to come back. So I'll be grinding the preseason streets too.
Well, the preseason is like, it's silly season as far as
shit show. Oh yeah.
Oh, so you prefer shit show DFS?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, like not the same comparison, but like this past Sunday for NFL was like kind of a shit show slate, not in terms of like news and stuff, but like it's gross. Like, right. People are like debating, David Montgomery and Devontae Booker and like Brandon Cooks and like these kind of like what would normally be gross plays, or like people have, no news on preseason, or like college basketball. I like to play college basketball too, because it's that way. I love to embrace like that unknown, and like, we've talked about it, like being uncomfortable is like where I try to like pride myself. Like, dude, I played Derek Carr. Like, I don't think I've ever played Derek Carr in DFS in my life. And I played Derek Carr on Sunday because people are like, no way I'm playing Derek Carr. It's like all that, like just uncomfortable, like feelings around different DFS sports. That's my favorite.
So, but in preseason for NBA, I mean, the edge, you have to think that the more uncertainty there is, the bigger the edge is in information. Like it used to be in DFS back in the old days, 10 years ago, that having the information in and of itself was the edge, was who's out, who's in, the rotations in basketball games, and even just a bare basic projection model. Like you could crush just by that. And even now in 2020, where there's obviously a lot more available information, you could easily get access to a reasonably good projection model. But with the uncertainty comes like finding out, like the typical player for preseason. We see it with NFL, right? I think it's not just information, it's how the nuance of the game, like DFS wise, changes when there is less certainty on playing time. So, for instance, in NFL preseason, which I've played before, I don't particularly enjoy playing it, but a lot of times, like if I played preseason NFL the year that the World Cup happened, so like I didn't play MLB that entire year because the World
Hmm.
Cup is 2 months long and it's every day, and soccer's my main sport. So I'm like, I don't. If I'm going to take off 2 months of MLB, I might as well just not even play MLB because I'm not
Yep.
having no idea what's going to go on. So like once that was over, then we had that August, and I'm like, okay, well I can play NFL preseason because I'm not playing MLB. The biggest difference between like the edge there is understanding how the DFS strategy changes when the starters are not going to see a full complement of snaps. So, for instance, in NFL, like if you're playing cash games in NFL preseason, the common build was to take like multiple quarterbacks and kickers and defenses because like there's going to be no wide receiver that gets the 100-yard bonus. There's going to be no running back that gets the 100-yard bonus. Like the starters, if they're even going to play, are going to play like the first half and that's it. Then the
Yep.
second team is going to play the third quarter, and then the third team is going to play the fourth quarter. So you had tons of people rostering full price starting wide receivers that, if they get 4 catches, like that's a good half. So like that changes the whole aspect of how you play DFS in NBA preseason. I'm going to assume because I haven't played it that it's
Hmm.
it's it's much similar to that, where first off finding the information of like whether or not the star player is actually going to play in this game. I mean, sometimes like they literally don't play at all, and
Yep.
then figuring out that if they do play, like are they only going to play 20 minutes, right? Is the backup point guard going to actually see 32 minutes in this game, and then the third point guard sees the other time? So the pricing on the sites are typically built around as if the players are going to get their normal kind of workload. So do you find that it's not just figuring out who's going to play and what the
Hmm.
rotation is going to be in basketball? It's more the fact of how does that relate to the pricing and the construction in your lineup, that you could take advantage of the field who may be rostering a player that's overpriced, that may be efficiently priced for 34 minutes of play, and we know in NBA minutes equals money, that they're gonna roster them for 34 minutes of play, and you're gonna embrace the uncertainty and go, well, maybe he just plays 24 minutes this game, and like he's gonna get a snowflake in 24 minutes unless he's like absurdly efficient. Are those the types of things that you look into for preseason, especially?
Yeah, I think preseason, you pretty much hit on it. The reason why I like things like preseason, things like college basketball, things that the more two things, the more uncertainty that you bring about, the more ability you have to capitalize on your opponent's mistakes. Likewise, the more decision points there are in a game, the DFS game, not like in an actual basketball game, the more decision points there are, on a slate. Same thing. The more potential edges you can extract from a slate. So you're adding in this element of uncertainty where literally no one knows. Like yes, there's we're all reading the same stuff. The people that are grinding it, there's tons of dead money. You talk about in the large field tournaments, there's like say for NFL, there's no more dead money than in like the Millie Maker, right, on an NFL Sunday. The percentage of dead money in like the large field tournaments on a preseason slate is like absurd. I mean, truly absurd. There's so many like there's dead lineups in NFL, but they're at least like rostering players that are playing, like that are like accumulating points. There's people, playing like completely dead lineups that are going to score like 40 fantasy points. So like there's tons of dead money. There's so much uncertainty, which is kind of like where I think tournament players should thrive. Like there's no uncertainty around a 4K running back, or a min price point guard stepping into 35 minutes, right? Like there's no one like a little uncertainty, very, very, very little. There's uncertainty on every single player on any sort of like preseason slate. And then there's that added decision point, right? Of, okay, you have the information. So we just have to figure out who's a good play, which is harder on those slates than it is like for NFL. Like any casual, you talk about it a lot, just pull up projections. You can figure out a cash game team. You can figure out who the best plays are. Don't ask me a 1v1. So just look at the projection. That's the best play. It's easy. Projections are nowhere near as good for these kind of sports. So we're all kind of figuring that out and figuring out the volatility of the projections together. And then, so you have the projections, and then you start applying these like DFS concepts, right? Like stacking is a little bit different in preseason, but there's correlation. There's still added correlation benefits of things, even like preseason. And then there's the game theory aspect. Like most people never get that deep. They're just at the information level. Even like good players, because they don't need to. They just their EV is so high just by the information edge over the casuals that they can just crush by playing the best plays. But if you add in a couple extra decision points, you don't have to do that much to extract a ton of edge in tournaments, even against some of the better players, because they're just smashing all these best plays and making huge ROI just because like the level of quality from the field is really bad. But we also get major chalk based on just, there's a couple of plays that will pop or a handful of plays that will pop based on, we don't get that much news. So the little bit of news you do get, so-and-so backup point guard, Kyrie is only going to play the first quarter, so Spencer Dinwiddie, it's like, 85% owned or whatever is Spencer Dinwiddie. Cause it's like, okay, well, Kyrie's not going to play, and maybe you do have to play him, but then there's just more decision points around that. It's like, well, what about the third string point guard? What about this? What about that? There's so many more decision points that I think those kinds of slates across all sports, I like it because it's inherently there in something like preseason and summer league and that kind of stuff. College basketball is very much that way. There's so much uncertainty, but other sports slates that are like that with more decision points and more difficult, more uncertainty, I just think is a lot more fun. I enjoy that a lot more.
Right. We typically consider NBA DFS to be the least amount of volatility, only because of its iterative scoring. Right. There's no lucky event. Right. A guy can't come in for 4 minutes and score 50 points. Like someone in NFL in one snap could 12 points in one snap. In baseball, one home run, 14 points. The volatility in preseason is more due to the minutes. It's more due to, like, in the regular season, like, the least, like, even outside of the regular season, playoff basketball is probably the lowest variance DFS there is. Because they, like, it's a playoff game. Like, if it's a close game, Giannis is going to play as many minutes as possible. Kawhi is going to play as many minutes as possible. You're going to see Harden play 44 minutes in this game. Like, these rotations aren't going to be 12-man rotations. They're going to be, unless one team's getting blown out or something, like, they're going to be playing the max. And that's the main reason in the regular season why players get rested while there is load management, because they know that once the playoffs come around, like, you're going to be out there as long as physically possible. And because of that, and we have these 9-man rotations, playoff basketball for DFS is like, it's almost, I don't want to call it a solved game, but the amount of shots, like risks that you take, especially on these smaller slates, we have 3-game basketball playoff slate, like, it's very hard to be different because it's like, if you're not going to play this player that's going to play the whole game, you're going to play another player that's going to play the whole game. I mean, right. There aren't, like you said, there aren't as many decision points because the options are limited. We don't get 11-game playoff basketball slates, where at least there are multiple options like that. But in the regular season, there's still volatility, but it's a matter of, like, okay, does the 6th man off the bench, someone like Will Barton, someone like, like those types of guys where their minutes volatility could be, well, they could play 24 minutes, they could play 32 minutes. Like, in basketball, 8-minute difference like that is big, especially for players that are in the 5 to 6K range, where if they get max minutes, like, they're going to be on a GPP winning lineup, and if they don't, they're going to be a snowflake. But in the preseason, that kind of minutes volatility extends to literally all the players. Like, we're not it's not the type of thing where we know that Bradley Beal is going to play 36 minutes median wise. So all these projections are all minutes wise based on a median. So you go 36 minutes for Beal, but that could end up being 34. It could end up being 38. And if he gets into foul trouble, it could end up being 30, right? If it goes into overtime or it's a really close game, maybe it ends up being 40. But we don't get ones where, yeah, his median is 34, but his low range is 18. Like in preseason, you're not going to get the upper range. That's why these medians on the minutes are going to have to come down. But the volatility, the standard deviation of those minutes in preseason are just like up in the air. Just like this could be the game where the star player on the team, they said, okay, we're gonna let you play this entire preseason game and play a normal load, and then the next game not play at all. But but without looking at like coach speak or beat writers, and half the time they're wrong. Like you may not even know that until like after lock, until you wonder why so and so played the entire first quarter and then literally never got back in the game. Like literally didn't come in for the second quarter rotation and then never played the second half. And you're sitting there, 12 minutes. You paid $8,500 for this guy, right? He's sitting there with 16 points and he's 40% owned, right? Because like no one would have known. Like there was no information that. Like at work that you thought at worst he's going to play 28 to 30 minutes. And it's like, nope, 12 minutes. But you don't see that in regular season, right? Like you're never going to see that situation unless obviously a guy gets ejected or whatever. That a starting star player is going to come in and out of the blue. I mean, you get that from the rotational guys like those the surprise DNPs, right? When you're playing like, okay, I'm going to play the backup center. Right, I'm gonna go for maybe they're gonna, the Nuggets. They're gonna play big this game, and it turns out they play small, and Millsap's sitting there with 16 minutes instead of 28. Like those things happen, but typically they're on a player by player basis. In NBA, if you follow it, you kind of know who those players are.
Yep.
Those high standard deviation players. That's why they become quote GPP plays. But in preseason, you have to go in. With the notion, to me, it's a mental thing. Like, am I going to play preseason NBA? Most probably not. But is it due because, like, well, I don't think I have an edge? I just think the amount of time and mental anguish I have to put in it's a short sample. It's only going to be like 10 days. And it's like, okay, am I going to sit down and grind? Because, like, I'm going to have to find... I can't just show up in half an hour before the slate and start making lineups. Like, I'm going to have no idea what the hell's going on. So now I need to mentally commit to, okay, I'm going to find my edge and hopefully realize it in 10 days. And knowing that an hour after lock, I may be throwing shit at my TV, right? I'm probably not even watching. So it's not going to be I'm watching something else. I rarely watch NBA basketball. I'll watch the play-by-play, the little, like this guy scored, that guy scored type of stuff, or on the app or something, but I'm rarely watching, maybe a West Coast game, it's like the last game, and I'll throw it on and fall asleep to it or something. But I have to go in, especially in preseason, and know that, like, I have to mentally, like, I'm not going to tilt. I usually don't tilt at all. But go in going, okay, I'm going to make my decisions, find my leverage, get my correlation, which there isn't that much in NBA, and know that it's quite possible I'm rostering a guy that's going to get 8 points. I have to commit mentally, psychologically, that this could be a slate that I put in $500 and get zero back very easily. And if you're willing to do that, I think you could be successful at it. But I think so many people go in and go, they come at it, they look at it like, how could I possibly play NBA preseason? It's just, it's a luck fest, tilt session, and they don't play it. But as long as you understand that that's what you're getting into, you could commit yourself and find an edge. And it's just a matter of, can you realize that in like 10 or 11 days?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what I was going to kind of like add is what you said. You have to be willing to go in knowing that, like, it not only is it possible, it's quite likely you're going to lose, and like you're just going to get, you're going to totally brick. You just have to embrace that. But that's like, all these things are the concepts that I just like. All my kind of favorite and the things I believe in the most in terms of being successful at DFS, like all manifest within this preseason thing. First of all, like I said, I don't think it's for everybody. Like it's for me because I enjoy it. But like I totally like you said, I don't think most people would enjoy it. So I'm not recommending it to most people because, there is definitely like the stress and anguish and time and all of that it's just not for everybody to commit. But I think it pulls together all of these different things. Like I am willing on every DFS sport that I play, every slate that I play, I am willing to go into it. And I believe you have to be long-term successful. I'm willing to go into it like, yep, totally fine with losing today. Like it's probably going to happen. Like not only am I like embracing it, like I probably know that it's most likely going to happen. And I don't think, and so I think people have started to come around to that a little bit, like in terms of fading chalk in the NFL and all that kind of stuff. But people don't embrace it in things where like they don't even feel comfortable guys are going to play. Like that's a very, very different level of uncertainty and risk.
Right. Like, we see
it's not human.
Right. We see in the NFL, for instance, like all the time, like, okay, I'm going to take a shot on Frank Gore. Up, second play of the game, done. Right. Antonio Gibson on the short slate yesterday. Mm-hmm. Like he's 50% owned. First series of the game, turf toe, gone, done. Like we see that every week in NFL. So I think people still tilt those types of injuries, but to them it's like expect like there's going to be a couple of players on this slate that get injured. Hopefully it's not mine. Like they're going in thinking that already, but it's almost in the back of their head. It's like, well, it can't happen to me, right? It's either one or the other. Typically, you deal with people like this. I'm in the RG Discord. Typically, it's one of the other type of people. It's it can't happen to me type of people, right? I'm going to roster this guy. This guy's like, well, he's coming off an injury. I'm going to take Julio Jones. Screw it. He's low owned. I'm going to play him, and then he gets injured, and then it's like, well, how could that happen to me? Like you had to have known, like that had a propensity coming with a Q tag or something like that. But then you also have, I think, the predominant amount of people that almost manifest those things to happen to themselves, right? Where it's like, okay, I'm rostering these guys. I know I like before the slate starts. It's like, okay, what two players of mine are getting injured this slate? And it tends to, I don't know if it's a karma thing, it's a cosmic thing, but there are certain people that like, it's the type of thing where I will jokingly ask those people, like, who you playing? Who you playing tomorrow? Right? Who you playing tomorrow? Oh, I'm playing this guy. Shit, I have a lot of that guy. Right? You follow certain people on Twitter that are always tilting over like, okay, I'm all in on these three guys. And you're like, I have two of them. And this guy seemingly always loses. So like, maybe I got to bump down maybe I got to take him out of some lineups. But to me, like the reason why you can have an edge in the game is because of the uncertainty. I had a question on Twitter. Someone asked me, because I'm on the DK committee, like, can you tell them to get rid of the DST position in NFL, right? Because it's essentially a luck fest, right? Mm-hmm. And they're like, well, it makes it not a skill game if you have DST, because the Patriots defense 30 points, like you're dead, right? Like that type of thing. But I said back to him, I said, no, it's there for a reason. It's there to reduce the skill gap. If this game was too skillful, bad players wouldn't play anymore. They'd lose too often. That, you lose enough as it is in DFS, playing well, that, like, imagine if we added MPE to NFL and Superflex and no DST, like, basically, like, the best players are gonna get even more of the money, and the ecosystem dies. So, like, the purpose for the DST position is almost like a random die roll, right? It's almost like, okay, roster 8 players, and then you have this randomizing factor in your DST slot that some weeks it doesn't matter. Some week no defense really scores that much. And then some weeks it's like, if you didn't have one of these two defense, Falcons last week, nope, you really can't win a GPP without him type of thing. But You need to have bad players that play long-term bad. Get lucky enough every once in a while, just like in poker. A bad player could call you with a 3-outer and hit, right? They'll hit, 15% of the time,
Mm-hmm.
But without those 15% of the time, the game would end up being like chess. And I tweeted about, like, I watched the Queen's Gambit, and I'm like, what? The reason I never cared about getting into chess, while I got into poker, I played some backgammon, I played gin rummy, I played anything involving probabilities, where
Mm-hmm.
there's some random event that you could gauge, like an expected value on decisions, like, and I could do that better than others, and there's money in that. Because in gin rummy, someone could get gin on the draw, right? Like I can't stop that, right? In backgammon, if someone rolls double sixes against me every roll, like they're gonna win. Like there's no way for me to prevent that. In poker, you could hit a 3-outer. I mean that happens. In chess, it's a game of complete information. There's no variance in it, right? The skillful player will win nearly all the time. Like so often that who's going to bet money on it? Am I going to be able to find an underground game of bad chess players that are willing to play $1,000 a game and play me more than 10 times with me winning 10 times in a row? Like, you're not going to, like, the money dries up. There's no money. Yeah, there may be some money in the high. If you are one of the top 20 players in the world, maybe. And even then, like, how do you find games? So I view the DSD position, the variance that's in DFS, is there for a reason. It's a way to reduce the skill gap so we have Joe Schmo putting in a $20 lineup on the couch, thinking that he could win, because he can. We see lineups that win the Millie Maker that go, I don't know how that was put together, but we have hundreds of thousands of people that are doing that. So one of those people are going to get lucky. And then once someone sees, like in a commercial, oh, so-and-so Joe Schmo on his couch won $1 million, like, well, I know football, I could do that. Like, if the game was too skillful, like, you never have those commercials, right? It would always be, some nerd, right? Some nerdy, the guy that doesn't appeal to Joe Schmo, right? You have Alex Baker out there, right? Right? I'm nothing against him. I think he's funny on Twitter, but
Yeah.
not necessarily
he embraces it. I don't think
right, of course, but I mean, not the David Mock is a quiet. Most of the best DFS players are quiet, nerdy guys, right? Mm-hmm. I'm a nerdy guy. I just happen to be just abrasive and just yell a lot. But it doesn't get people into the ecosystem. So, like, the whole fact of embracing uncertainty is good for both good players and bad players, because bad players could get, when there's more uncertainty, bad players have more of a shot of getting lucky, because, like, you could randomly put in preseason NBA, you could randomly put in guys, and it could be, you put in the third shooting guard on the team, and it just so happened in that game in preseason they said, okay, let's give him a shot for 36 minutes, and he's sitting there at 3,200 and he puts up 45 points. He's 2% owned, and he's owned by only the people that are just like, well, I need a $3,200 guy. I plugged him in, and you see them in a GPP winning lineup and go, what did that guy know? It's like he didn't know anything. You just mash buttons, and he got there. So I think it's important. Like, I think the concept of uncertainty is important, because most DFS players look for certainty. You have to admit, right? Most people they'll look at a slate. They're trying to predict outcomes. Where can I find the most certainty? Oh, I have the most certainty with Dalvin Cook. Like, yeah, but you're paying $9,500 for the certainty. Like, you're paying for the certainty. You look at a slate and you go, Brandon Cooks. It's like, okay, well, he's going to have to get the target. Like, I'm certain of that thing. Whether or not it turns out to end up being a ceiling score, well, you don't know what the efficiency is going to be. But you're certain that if I play Brandon Cooks, that I'm not going to feel stupid, right? Because I'm going to see so many other people play him. He has the highest probability, based on any projection model you saw, of having a ceiling score for a wide receiver. So you feel like when Brandon Cooks puts up 11.5 points, that you got unlucky, right? because they embraced the certainty and didn't get rewarded for it. And they're like, well, I went to Dalvin Cook. Well, I embraced the certainty. You eventually got there. I don't think you needed the 26.9 points. You embraced the certainty of Devontae Adams. Well, he got there, right?
Yeah.
Right? So people look most of the time to embrace certainty. But I think that's a losing mentality. Because the more certainty that you embrace, the less leverage you have, the less win equity your lineup has. Because the certainty is much easier to see from the field. The uncertainty is the stuff that people don't go to, right? The uncertainty of playing Andy Isabella, who put up 2.7 points, right? I embraced
Ruggs.
uncertainty.
Henry Ruggs is my favorite example. Henry Ruggs from this was a good, that was a total probably fluke of what happened on Sunday with the Jets. Oh my God, giving up the long touchdown to Henry Ruggs on the last play of the game. But he is a very, very, very uncertain player who could get a 0. He's kind of a deep shot, rookie who doesn't get a lot of work. So no one plays him, despite the fact that he has a ton of upside. And look, no one predicted that to happen, but it's irrelevant. You win, in my opinion, long term by capitalizing on we talked about the Drew's thing, but winning when the unexpected events happen. When the expected things happen, everybody wins, right? Everybody that played when David Montgomery scores 2 touchdowns and Devontae Adams scores 2 touchdowns and Dalvin Cook scores 2 touchdowns and Brandon Cook scores 2 touchdowns. Guess what? Probably the best players in the world are winning because they got more of all those guys than you do. And everybody has good teams, and who gives a shit? When those guys don't have that ceiling outcome, and the random, the Henry Ruggs, the Andy Isabella, the whatever, insert kind of volatile, unexpected, murky play. When those hit and outscore the expected guys, that's when you win, because no one else has those. No one else played those guys because of that uncertainty.
Right. Like I went into this past slate with people making fun of me for playing a lot of Kyler Murray. They go, well, how do you play Kyler? The last 2 games, his shoulder injury, right? Yeah. They're not rushing the ball. I'm like, who said, are you certain of that? Like, how certain are you? You're being overconfident. Mm-hmm. We've seen even this year, in the beginning of the year, Kyler Murray's putting up nearly 40-point games, rushing the ball in or whatever. Maybe he had a shoulder injury the past 2 weeks. Maybe he's healthy now, right? I'm going to embrace that uncertainty. You're not willing to do so. I'm willing to do so. And if it turns out that he's perfectly fine and they're going to rush the ball a ton, he's going to be low owned. I'm going to pair him up with a Hopkins and Isabella, a Kirk or something. Run that back with a Cup or a Woods instead of playing the Goff stack, and I'm going to print money. Now, if it doesn't happen, it doesn't mean that I'm willing to take the shot at the lower ownership. If the whole field thought, oh, Kyler Murray's healthy now, and now he's going to be 15% owned, then I'd be like, well, now you're too certain of that. So, like, all the things that I'm looking at are, where's the field too certain of, and how can I embrace more uncertainty, even if the prevailing notion is the same thing with wide receiver cornerback matchups. Aren't you afraid of X guy? Like, what? Are you certain of that? How certain are you? You can't be 100% certain of that. Oh, this guy's going to shadow this guy. That's even half the time that doesn't even happen, right? Right? You take a look on so many of these slates where people have this is certainly going to happen. To me, that's predicting outcomes, and it's like you don't win at DFS by predicting outcomes. You win at DFS by creating good lineups that capitalize on unexpected outcomes more so than figuring out whether or not, if Anthony Ferkser is going to be 50% owned and we have a million other punt tight ends, like, why don't you just play another guy? Or why don't you just pay up at tight end and you play Darren Waller? Well, Darren Waller this whole year has not put up or whatever. Like, they're playing the goddamn Jets, for crying out loud. Maybe this is the week that he puts up a big score. Are you willing to embrace the uncertainty of Darren Waller's ceiling. Well, if you did, you got rewarded. And if you were too scared to do so, well, you'd had no chance of winning. So, like, I take a look at Austin Eckler this past week. I had very little of Austin Eckler. I didn't play him in cash games because people took a one-game sample size of him with no Kalen Ballage in the backfield and then playing down him getting 14 targets and going, well, that's Austin Eckler. I go, are you sure? Like, how certain are like how like I'm listening to shows and people are and hearing people going like they're certain of this. Like, yes, you're right. He does have PPR upside. I mean, he does get. I get that, right? But we haven't seen it. How much is Ballage going to play? Austin Eckler is not historically a guy that plays more than 60% of the snaps to begin with, right? So, like, they have other running backs. Yes, he'll catch some balls out of the backfield, but he's 7K and he's going to be high owned. So, like everyone's acting like this is a certain situation, and I think it's much less certain than the field. So I just went with the uncertain. I'm just like, well, why am I playing that? I'm playing more Myles Gaskin, right? Yep. Now in the high stakes, Myles Gaskin was played a lot more. In the low stakes, he wasn't. I mean, the difference between like the game changer and the play action is like 3 times because he's coming back from injury. But you take a look at that situation in the backfield that there's literally no other running back other than Patrick Laird. And I go, I'm just going to embrace that he practiced the past 2 weeks. I'm assuming that he's going to play 90% of the snaps. Like, I'm just going to, and if people are like, are you sure of that? It doesn't matter. I want you to be unsure because the more unsure you are, the less owned he's going to be. And of course, Gaskin gets 6 carries inside the 5-yard line and can't fucking put it in. Right?
Don't remind me.
He should have 30 points, but whatever.
That was brutal.
Yeah, but these are the concepts of, like, we see guys coming back from injury and go, well, I can't play. People wanted to prove it weak. Like, to me, I hate that. Like, no, I want to be on the week where everyone thinks that they have to prove it because I'm getting them cheaper and at lower owned. Once they prove it, all the value in that play goes out the window. It's very simple. It's very similar to sports betting with when lines move, right? Oh, I want to see what other people are betting on before I bet. Like, no, all the value's gone, right? You want to if you're going to bet on a game or something, you want to bet on Tuesday for a Sunday game before the line moves. But it's like, well, I'm not sure if, like, well, this guy could be injured and that guy could be out and whatever. Like, no. If you're right and you bet on Tuesday, your closing line value is going to be immense. If you are right, you're going to get a line that's 2 or 3 points that no one else is getting. Of course, you probably can't put a ton of money on that early in the week, but whatever. Well, I mean, that's the whole different argument. But being early on a player, being early on a team, being early on a situation, like you'll get it right less often, but when you get it right, you'll make more money. So waiting for the certainty, like it's not profitable. At best, it's break even. So I always, when I always say, like, why are you so certain? And are there situations where it's uncertain that it shouldn't be, right? That you look at and like when Julio Jones is 4% owned on a slate at 6,600, I go, why not take a shot? Well, his hamstring and the Saints defense and whatever. It's like, yeah, that's what most of the field is. They think that they think that. Why don't you embrace? Doesn't mean you play Julio Jones in all your lineups, but why don't in the lineups that it makes sense in? If you're playing Taysom Hill and Michael Thomas, play Julio Jones in that lineup, and then not worrying about what the results are. Worry about that's why I constantly come back to I judge myself based on the ownership, not based on the results. I look and I see Julio Jones is 4% owned. I go, I made the right decision. Doesn't matter how many points he puts up at that point. It's like, I'm embracing the uncertainty, and if he gets there, he gets there, and if he doesn't, he doesn't. I know I'm going to be wrong 90% of the time, right? Like, it's not about being right more often. It's about making the most money. So you make the most money by embracing the uncertain situations more than trying to find the certainty. Oh, I'm certain Devontae Booker is going to get a ton of the work against a horrible Jets team, and the Raiders like to run the ball. Well, they decided to pass the ball a ton. So you were obviously overconfident in that situation. Kiki Qt, I heard so many people, Kiki Qt's role isn't going to change. He's going to be in the slot, right? Like, people are overreacting to this. 3,500 for, and the Texans team total is low or whatever. I mean, he was owned. I mean, I'm not saying he wasn't owned, but there were ton of narrative on, is this bad chalk, right?
It was up in the air. He was one that was he ended up coming in pretty owned, but he was one I wasn't sure. I knew Cooks, like we knew Cooks was going to be really owned. I wasn't sure what the field was going to do with Kuti because of exactly what you said. There was a lot of uncertainty around him, and people were really unsure of how to handle him, I think.
Right, but if you embrace that uncertainty, you got rewarded.
Oh yeah,
right. And if you embrace the uncertainty, of course, Cooks got a concussion protocol and was out for a quarter, but whatever. So I mean, we take a look at like Thielen coming back for the Vikings. Like, are you willing to embrace? I played a lot of Thielen as leverage off a Cook. Mm-hmm. And it turns out it's so weird, the dynamics between the contest you play and the contest I play. The game changer. I just want to point this out because I thought it was the biggest discrepancy I've seen between contests. If we look at the Vikings, in the game changer, and even the spy, Thielen. Let me scroll all the way down. Like, Justin Jefferson was 7% owned in the game changer. He was 18% in the play action. Like, Thielen was more owned in high stakes and Jefferson was not, while in the lower stakes it was the opposite way around. You would think with the past results that Jefferson would get more ownership and Thielen coming back, but obviously sharper players think that they're reacting to that of like, oh, people are going to go recency bias on Justin Jefferson, and they're not going to play Thielen, even though Thielen gets more red zone targets, and that's good leverage off a Cook. And like, so in the higher stakes, everyone did that. And Justin Jefferson sitting there at 7% owned, when if you knew beforehand that Thielen was going to be 16% owned and Jefferson was going to be 7% owned, you play fucking Jefferson every single goddamn time, right?
Right.
But if you played the lower stakes, you did the opposite type of thing. So those are uncertain. See, you could even see in the higher stakes, Andy Isabella, those Kyler Murray, Isabella teams, single entry high stakes, that they were owned. Kyler Murray was like the fourth highest owned quarterback in higher stakes, but garbage owned in the lower field, lower stakes, large field is in the game changer. Andy Isabella, 13% owned. Play action, 2%. Like, the disparity between that is kind of ridiculous. Not in a good or bad way, just in a you have to really consider what contest you play and how this comes down to how observant your opponents are. So like in poker, I always say that the number one thing I need to estimate when I'm sitting at a table is how observant are my opponents. Which opponents are more observant than others? The guy that's not observant, like, he's not going to take into account that I just bluff this guy or I just 3-bet over here and fold. Like, that I show down aces. Like, they're not paying attention enough. So I can't third level think them because they're not even thinking about what I've done. But right. Against players that are observant, then I go, okay, now I have to determine my action. What I'm going to do right now, how much I'm going to bet, and now I'm considering what my opponent have seen me done in the past. Do I take the same line and represent a different hand? Do I take the does he think I'm going to do that? So now I'm going to play it in a different way. Well, now I need to judge how observant my opponent is. The same thing applies to DFS of, well, I'm playing in a contest with 90% like smart people, and they're more likely looking at projections, so they're more likely to see, QT as a value. They're more likely to see that David Montgomery is, more likely to play this type of lineup. So now I could take advantage of, like, okay, they're observant. They're observant of, like, Justin Jefferson being, now that Thielen's back, Jefferson maybe is a little overpriced at 7,300. Now the lower stakes players aren't going to be that observant. They're just going to look at game logs and go, Justin Jefferson, let me play him, right? So at the higher stakes, maybe you embrace the fact that, well, Jefferson could still get there. I mean, he's still a great receiver. He's still great leverage on Cook. So do that instead. But that's still all a basis of how observant in head-to-heads. Do I switch off of this guy? Do I try to, do I block here? Right? You're looking at a head-to-head, you're down by 20 points. You're like, do I leave Devontae Adams there? Do I switch to DK Metcalf? Do I do something like that? Well, all of that, you have to consider your opponent. If it's some random dude that I've never seen before, I'm most likely going to assume that they don't late swap, right? That they're not observant
Yep.
enough to try to like galaxy brain swap so they block me type of thing. But against someone that is a regular in the lobby, we have one slot left, and he knows that I have Adams in that slot, and he can't block me there, but he could move his quarterback to like Aaron Rodgers and like at least mitigate some of those points or something like not many people do that to begin with, even
Right.
good players. But I'm more likely to consider that third level if I know that my opponent is more observant. So that, I mean, how much uncertainty you embrace is also dependent on the contest that you play.
Yep. I think the biggest thing. So this is the first time I pulled up Results TV and kind of looked. This is I'm pretty stunned at not just the differences, but just some of the ownerships that guys came in. Period. But I think this past Sunday slate, and this is kind of how I felt about it. This is the main thing that I wrote about in my kind of tournament breakdown, if you will, article that I write every week on RotoGrinders, was this exact conversation that we're having right now. I said this was a week when you just take a step back, right, and think about the guys who are going to be popular and how everyone was approaching this slate. It was the exact conversation we are having in terms of everyone felt certain about David Montgomery's volume for his price. Everyone felt certain about Brandon Cook's volume for his price. Everyone felt certain about Dalvin Cook. They felt certain about whatever, XYZ. Now Jonnu's out and they felt certain about Ferkser. Eckler came back and got 14 targets. They felt certain about Eckler, right? If Josh Jacobs is out, you feel certain about Devontae Booker against a horrible Jets team, right? Everyone feels certain about all these guys. And this is not like none of these guys, I guess, the Dalvins and Devontaes, you can feel pretty certain about them in general, just like from a total raw floor perspective, not from a tournament perspective. But like everyone felt so certain about these guys. And I thought, not to get specific, too specific, and I'm not trying to shit on people that had, certain opinions about things. But what you outlined with Ferkser and Eckler, I thought were two of the most egregious things that people were so certain about, maybe of this entire season. And I love Austin Eckler. I played Austin Eckler last week, not week 13, in week 12. I played Austin Eckler because of what you said. I wanted to capitalize on him at 6,000 when everybody was like, we got reports he's not going to get all the new, he's not going to get all the work. I don't know. Well, that's when I want to pounce. Now everybody comes back. He gets a big price hike. Kalen Ballage is back. I guess everybody just assumed Ballage was, and I don't know if Ballage was going to play or not, but everybody assumed he wouldn't. And it's the Patriots. Like, I get the Patriots haven't been like that great, but that game was horrifically gross and slow, and the Patriots are just going to run. And like, when we don't know what is going to happen with Ballage, we don't know what we saw last week, even if Ballage was out again, if that's what they want to do with Eckler. They still have Josh Kelly. Like, there was so much uncertainty, and everyone felt so certain about Austin Eckler at this price. I was just floored. And then you have Ferkser, who's the highest owned player.
Ferkser, for instance, if it wasn't for the fact of their last drive, Ferkser would have been like, dude, he wasn't playing two tight end sets in the first half.
Correct. He wasn't playing. He wasn't even playing. And that was what I like. And again, I'm not trying to like victory lap this thing, because it just so he could have played every snap for all I know. And I would have had egg on my face. Right. But that's what I came in and I said, how can you possibly be so sure that Anthony Ferkser is about? First of all, Jonnu Smith is basically, I love Jonnu Smith. He's a good football player. He's a blocking tight end. They don't even throw him the ball. So like you're taking out a guy who doesn't get the ball, and you're putting in a guy who, like, what volume is he soaking up? None. There is none to be soaked up. And Anthony Ferkser is very clearly, as we've seen all year, like a receiving tight end, and he's fine. He's fine in that role. But like, Now they brought back Michael Pruitt and they had Jeff Swain, which are just big bruising blocking tight ends, right? So who do you think fills in for the blocking tight end? Not the receiver, the blockers. So I was like, I'm not saying Firkser isn't going to play more, but it doesn't make a lot of logical sense that Firkser is all of a sudden this smash $2,500 play. Like everybody remember what's the kid from the Saints, Troutman. Everybody just shit on Troutman, right? And it's all ha ha ha. He got 0. You guys are all fish. You read into all this. You thought he was going to play, but everybody is just now still after that. Oh, Firkser. Yep, he was just a lock. What do you mean? It was the same thing. It was this. What was the difference between Troutman and Firkser? They're both bad. I think. We can argue all the different semantics, but there was so much uncertainty around Firkser, and he was 50% owned in the Game Changer, 50%. And people are just like, oh, yep, whatever. And people got lucky to get any points out of him. If they didn't lose by 40, he might have got a 0. So I thought this week was a really good, not lesson, but just there was so many plays that were so uncertain. So I thought even more so than a normal slate, going into it and embracing the fact that these plays were extremely uncertain and playing those kind of wide range of outcomes guys, which Darren Waller, I liked your example on Darren Waller. He's not necessarily a wide range of outcomes guy, but he hits this ceiling like we just saw, once or twice a year. He just has the random game where Derek Carr throws to him 20 times. It just happens. But everybody was so certain that the Raiders were just going to run and the Jets suck, so they won't be able to keep up, So they're just going to run, and there's this $2,500 tight end who, is a lock. So I can't play Darren Waller. Darren Waller was 5%. 5 against the Jets with there was just so much about this slate I thought was crazy. Not from the results, just from how the public approached it, and it all revolved around that certainty, I think. And so it just so happens to be a week that I actually, for the first time that we've been recording this podcast, had a good week. And shout out to Myles Gaskin for not getting in the end zone. It could have been a really nice week if he did, but I just thought it was such the perfect tournament week if you embraced kind of this uncertainty. And I thought, it ended up working out in the results. If you embraced that Titans game being more pass heavy, everybody was just oh my God, Henry and Chubb, they're just going to run the ball, right? And then, okay, I can use Firkser. A lot of sharp people were playing Baker and Tannehill and passing game options in that. And people were playing that Raiders passing game, Waller, and whether you like Ruggs or Aguilar, doesn't really matter. Mims and Crowder and all that kind of stuff. Everybody just took what they thought were layups, right? With Firkser and Montgomery and the Rams receivers. The Rams receivers were underpriced. So everybody's just playing all these guys who are locks for 10 to 15 points. And they pretty much were. But they didn't embrace any sort of uncertainty in tournaments, and those are the people that got rewarded, the ones who embraced the uncertainty this week.
And I actually went out and I went the opposite way on embracing uncertainty by embracing certainty that people didn't want to.
Yeah.
And to me, that was Frank Gore. People are paying down at running back. Okay, they're paying down over. They're playing. They're paying up. They're paying down. They're going all the way down to Montgomery or Gaskin or Booker, and I'm like, dude, Adam Gase runs the ball way too often. LaMichael Pirine isn't there. Frank Gore, the week before, got 80% of the snaps and also got 4 or 5 targets. The Raiders are not a good defense. The Jets could actually be competitive in this game, and if I could pay down for Gore, that means I could pay up for Waller. So, and that's correlative in the same game. So I look at Frank Gore's rushing prop, and it's 62. And I've never seen Frank Gore with a rushing prop that high.
Not in 15 years.
Right. And he projects well in every fucking model I see. And the first thing that, even if you watch the Leone and Dink and whatever, how about Frank Gore? You don't play Frank. That's because of that bias of, how do you play the 37-year-old running back for the Jets? And it's I take a look at, I'm going through ownership. I'm he projects well everywhere, but no one wants to play him. Like the general public doesn't want to play him. So like he is no casual person's going to plug in Frank Gore into their lineup unless they're a Jets fan, and even then they don't even want to play their own Jets.
Then they probably still don't play.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at that going, everyone's going down to Booker. I'm like, why don't I play Gore instead and play Waller across from him? Now, obviously, got unlucky that he got, concussed in the second play of the game. But we saw Ty Johnson come in and get
nuts.
100 yards rushing and a touchdown. He had 22 points, right?
They ran for like 200 and something yards, right? Like they just destroyed on the ground. It was
right.
crazy.
So, like, in theory, like, my Frank Gore was a good way to go. And he came in at I'm looking here. Frank Gore was the play action was 4%. The game changer was 2%. Spy 3%. The Millie 6%. Like, why am I like all the other guys that were 1,000 more expensive were like 4 times as owned.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and then I could flip my construction, right? Then I don't have to play Ferkser. Right? Then I could play Waller and Adams in the same lineup. Yep. I could pay up. I could play like Watson with Cooks and QT and do that, and with Hilton, right? Like I did those types. I did Rivers Hilton run back to get, all those types of things. But I mean, Frank Gore was the linchpin of most of those lineups. Like if Frank Gore didn't get hurt and he had Ty Johnson's scoreline, I would have done very well on Sunday, but I played enough of Waller, but I had Waller in correlative builds. So I had Waller with Perriman, Waller with Mims, Waller with Gore. Like I didn't want to play Waller as a one-off. It didn't fit in. He didn't necessarily project all that well for his price. So like he typically fit into correlative builds, less so. So like I always had a dud in those lineups anyway. But to me, the Frank Gore situation is like there's no uncertainty there. Like actually, there's no uncertainty. Frank Gore is sitting there going, if you told me like he's gonna get 20 touches, like no matter the Jets could be down 74 points, right in the fourth quarter, and he's still getting 2-yard carries. I mean, like it's still gonna happen. So like I embrace the certainty there when people weren't gonna embrace. Then you go, okay, we're going to play Austin Eckler for 7,100 and just assuming he's going to get 25 touches. And I'm like, dude, there's a guy at 4,400 that's going to get 20. Trust me, Adam Gase is going to give him 20 touches. They're going to run the ball. It doesn't matter what happens, and no one does it. So, like, that's a situation where almost you want to, like, you look, because people look at Gore and go, where's the ceiling? So the uncertainty comes into that fact of, like, but I looked at it as a situation of I don't need Gore to put up 25 points for 4,400. Yeah. All I need is for Gore plus Waller to put up 60. Right? That's all the reason you're playing that guy is not for a ceiling. It's for your construction leverage. Yep. Like if Adams puts up a 40-plus point game and Waller puts up a 40-plus point game, like if Gore has 15 points and no other running, and we have Gaskin only getting 15, right? We only have Dalvin Cook only getting 25. For 20, like it's a lineup that the outcome, like if Cook puts up a ceiling game and Eckler puts up a ceiling game and James Robinson if all the high price running backs, Derrick Henry goes off for 40 points, my lineup loses. It doesn't like it. Yes, Gore's not going to put up 40 points for me to make that up. That lineup wins in a situation where the high price running backs fail, or at least fail to put up enough points. So I think too many people look at players like Frank Gore, like the boring, like certain plays, that they make sense in builds with the construction difference makes it so that if the position that you're playing that guy in, let's say all the high-priced wide receivers fail, well, that means like if you paid down at 5K and got 20 points, like you're good. Like so you don't look at a 5K wide receiver and go, where's this guy's ceiling? It's like, well, the purpose of this lineup is that it wins when high-priced wide receivers fail. When you play the cheap quarterback, your lineup wins more often when the high-priced quarterbacks fail, not because Baker Mayfield puts up 35 points. So when people refuse to roster guys like Mayfield and Carr or play guys like Hunter Renfrow, they go, what's his ceiling? It's like, no, you're playing him because he's 4,000 and if the high priced wide receivers fail, you don't need 20 points from them.
Because people forget, and I think we all do from time to time, like in this exact conversation, it's because you're not trying to score the most points. Right. Which people are always like, what are you talking about? Of course I'm trying to score the most points. The person at the top of the tournament scored the most points. Well, yeah, but I'm trying to beat my opponents, right? Which doesn't always mean getting the most,
raw
point
points.
projection or the raw points high. That's not what I'm trying to do, right? And that's what the type of thing with Frank Gore is also like, if Frank Gore is having a good game, like you said, it sets up Waller, or it sets up whatever, Ruggs, Aguilar, whatever, and it busts Devontae Booker, right? So you're getting a Frank Gore happens to grind out the clock with his 20 carries and fall into the end zone once and gets his 18 points. You're elated. That's not a ceiling. He didn't score 30 points. It's not a ceiling, but you're elated at that for 4,400. He's probably not getting bludgeoned by the other running backs. And if they fail, you're getting Devontae Adams, you're getting Darren Waller, you're getting, and then the correlation aspect with Waller, it's this, because you're playing the game, you're not playing the
player. I don't care about the player. People, how are you rostering Frank Gore? Who gives a shit? He's 4,400 and he's projected for this meet. Like, I'm just looking at projections and he's going to be 4% owned. I'm looking at all these guys in the same range that are going to be 30+% owned, and no one wants to play old man Gore. And I'm like, I see lineups. It's not just because this comes back to end it, because I know you got to get out of here and do some more content, because there seems to be football on every goddamn day. It's lineups, not players. People look at Frank Gore and go, how do I play Frank Gore? I said, well, build a lineup with Frank Gore. And you go, well, if you play Waller, if you put everything together, you go, well, let me take a look at my median projection and let me take a look at my ownership and go, wow, that you could actually make a highly projected lineup that has leverage and correlation with Frank Gore in it. And then you have to get out of your mind that you're playing Frank Gore. Who cares? It's just a name on the spreadsheet. It just, if that's what it is, that is what it is. So it's not about the players. It's about the lineups.
Yep. And I think I felt so, good about this week, not like how the results would turn out, but just in terms of, it was just one of those weeks that I thought was just the perfect picture of both, like what you said too, right? Like, so Frank Gore is the same premise, just the opposite of embracing uncertainty, right? It's the exact same concept. When everyone thinks something is uncertain, that's when we can pounce. When everyone thinks something that is certain is uncertain, that's also when we can pounce.
Right. People think Frank Gore's certainty is he only gets 10 points, and that's it.
Right.
Yeah, so it's like, I'm certain he only gets 10 points. Like, who says that?
But what if he scores a touchdown? He is certainly going to score more than 10 points. Like, it's just true. So this week was such a great. I really think people should kind of go back. This was a really good week, I think, to looking at tournaments. Like, set aside the results, like whether you won or what the exact lineups were, that won, separate the plays from it. I think it was a really good, like, once we get through these damn Monday and Tuesday games, I'm going to go back through and kind of look at some of this slate, because I thought it was a really, really good slate to kind of analyze from a tournament perspective. And it all revolved around everything we talked about today, with like certainty versus uncertainty and all of that. So that's kind of like, my last note. I thought this slate was a really good one to kind of think about for tournaments.
Well, you could thumbs up if you're on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button. We're trying to beat on my channel. Trying to beat Pete Overzet. We're catching up, but he's still getting some. We're 150 behind. All so right. If you go sign up for YouTube under a second email and subscribe also. Hit the notification bell. Okay. Do stuff like that. Rate and review on iTunes. And Eric, you can follow him, Erik Beimfohr. Me at Blender HD. It's a shorter show. A lot of people like the longer shows. They like the fact that it's nearly a 2-hour long show. So this is going to be one of the shorter shows. But if there may be plenty of silent majority out there that are like, they look at 1 hour 50 minutes and go, ugh. But I mean, most of the feedback has been that, like, dude, if you guys are, if you want to talk for 3 hours, it's a podcast, so you could pause at any time. And most of the stuff that we talk about is kind of evergreen as it is, that you don't necessarily have to realize what the past slate was. So feel free to send in your questions at theoryofdfs.com, and check out the 15-hour audio DFS masterclass, The Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports. If you're more interested in the deep dive into all of these concepts, theoryofdfs.com. So for Erik Beimfohr, I'm Jordan Cooper, and that has been another episode of the Theory of DFS podcast.